speak data. And this slide is lovely. We have the March calendar in front of us. Our first webinar is today on how to speak data managers. Every Friday, we do a CDMP Q&A with Veronica Diesel, the Director of Education, and she will take you through the path to certification, to DAMA CDMP certification. And then on Monday, we have the ins and outs of data modeling. It's going to be with Esty again on data ontology is the future. So we're going to get a lot of Esty spoils and knowledge. Then on Wednesday, we're going to have data privacy with data management, or for data management professionals. It is International Women's Month, so we are trying to get all female professionals to speak and guest speak at our webinars this month. So looking forward to all of the wisdom from very powerful female professionals. After that is the how to speak data for citizens. And then on the 15th, we're going to have data culture change with Christine Iotis. She's incredible. I'm still looking for a guest speaker for the DAMA SA user group.
That's Caroline King from Carinium. I believe she would offer to speak.
Okay, amazing. So
She's from Ireland. So.
Okay, incredible. I'll get that sorted. Just looking for a South African, but that is incredible if she wants, and we can also book her for the future. Yeah, so then data management professionals would be the following Thursday. On the 21st is Human Rights Day in South Africa, so we'll be moving the big data science webinar to the following week, which will be Women in AI with Liesel Engelbrecht, and her name is Natalie Raffel. I'm sorry, I've forgotten her surname. She is the ambassador of Africa, or South Africa, and so she will be sharing with us. And then it will be our final one with the how to speak data for executives. And on the 26th, we have the CDMP refresher course with Veronica again. If you're planning to write your CDMP exam, this is the course to go to. It's a one-day crash course of everything that you need to know, tips and tricks for the exam. And I know many people, including Esty, will vote very highly upon this course and score highly as well in your exam. So yeah, that is what March is looking like. And then for training, we have, it's already in session, which is that how to analyze data. That's data warehousing and BI. If I'm not mistaken, it's including 2 other things. But yeah, if you would like to know for future when we're going to host that course again, please drop me an email. We can drop Paul Bolton, contact Howard on LinkedIn, and we can help you with the following how to analyze data. We also have other specialist courses. So if you're interested in writing your specialist exam, we can help you. And then the following week will be the data management for certification. It's for the data management fundamentals exam, which is, 4 days with Veronica, and she will give you the ins and outs of the DMBOK version 2. Next slide, please. Amazing. So we are using Menti for this webinar. Here's the QR code so that you can interact with Howard. I will post the code in the chat as well. So for any newcomers, and I'm going to sign on to it as well right now. And then, bloop, we're in. So join the conversation, join the questions, and let's have fun with this webinar. Amazing. Is that everything? Is there another slide? Marching through March. One more. Oh, so
Yes, I think
I'll take this one. I'll take this one.
It's like, do I hand over? I know I hand over on the slide.
Yes. This is the slide where you hand over.
Thank you, Esty, so much. We really appreciate you presenting today. And yeah, thank you so much.
It's a big pleasure, Debbie. Thank you for the introduction. So as you can see, marching through March, the demo sessions in March will be focused on how to speak data. So this almost, I want to start off with how to articulate yourself and how to say what you mean in a data context is something that I personally find particularly challenging. So I think it's a very good exercise to go through this. And I think a lot of the the data people share this with me. We just use jargon because to us that is normal words. That's the words everybody use. So we're going to talk about the power of the semantic chain and apply it to a real business case. So we're going to talk about how to speak sustainability, so an actual business case that we are currently busy with. Each of the different weeks, like Debbie covered, week 1 we'll be doing the data managers, then the data citizen, the data professional, and the data executive. So one comment is the business case is live and running, so we can share some lessons learned on the routes and update like we maneuver and reverse around this this business case. So on Menti, feel free to leave your comments, your suggestions. We'll be very thankful to have them all. And then I believe it is over to you, Howard, for the essential concepts.
And I'd just like to say thank you to the bulldog in the background. Bulldog name.
Julie. She is snoring.
The other woman is contributing. Thank you, Julie.
Yes.
Okay. Esti, thank you very much. It's really lovely to have you talking. And then just to maybe just to encourage you, just to say that I know Paul and Esti and JG have been working on a sustainability platform, and it's been interesting now in terms of saying, shucks, we've been doing all of this work, and now we want to see how we can transform the work that's been done into a semantic model and using a semantic model. So we would love to hear your questions, understand the challenges you have with semantic chain, with elements like that. So please contribute anything that you'd almost like to see or hear about from the sustainability semantics. If you could put that on Menti, and then questions in terms of other questions that you may have that can come in the Teams link. So we're just trying to keep the Menti with all the sustainability questions or the semantic chain questions. So we do have two. I know we may have confused in the last couple of weeks in terms of what do we use Menti for, what do we use Teams for. So this is about the journey, the 4-week journey that goes on to Menti. Okay, so again, I really like this almost this progression or continuum that people refer to. The taxonomy one that we have over here, this is instead of free text tags, there's just words that we use. That's typically where we have been to an extent with SharePoint, where we add files and then we just go and create the tags that we believe this file should have, and we'll add tags on as we go. Then we would have a controlled list, which is, for example, a drop-down. What's applicable within the drop-down. The taxonomy has a lot more connections to it and relationships between elements. And there's even the possibility of a multifaceted taxonomy, but we'll talk through that. And then you go to ontology, and the lovely thing about ontology is once you've done all this work, and especially in products like Top Quadrant, I know we were talking with Connie earlier today is about the use of top quadrant to define those taxonomies, ontologies, and then get them into a knowledge graph. So, but what's exciting is once you've got this knowledge ontology and you may have developed it with Protégé, it's then about getting it into and connected to our data. And we see that being actually manifesting within a knowledge graph. So I will talk about a little bit more, but this is the important one where we go just from almost a modeling and a metadata point of view to a pure data point of view. It's now connected in our data. Okay, so just a little bit of a recap. This was trying to put some training wheels on JG in terms of saying, JG, are you aware of what ontologies can do for sustainability? I'm sure if you are connected to the DAMA Norway user group and the Norway chat, they last week or last month, I think it was last month, where they actually discussed the ESG sustainability platform and what's happening in EU. And if you do a quick review on that, you'll actually see that in the EU taxonomy compass. So this is just a view of that EU taxonomy, and specifically around sustainability. You can go around there and have a look at what it has with respect to sustainability. So there are quite a few. PwC has it, the EU taxonomy, the Union taxonomy, the sustainable one. And so there's quite a few that come in here, and I know JG will give us some more background on that. But for now, I'll really just try to explain the background and what's contained within the DMBOK. Okay, so interestingly enough, this comes from document and content, an area that not many people enjoy, and I'm sure PG would not like to comment too much on that. But they were the ones who were pushed to establish these controlled vocabularies, and of course it's around the documents that they work with. All right, so simple definition: it's a defined list of explicitly allowed terms to index, categorize, tag, sort, and retrieve content through browsing and sorting. Okay. Controlled vocabulary should be aligned with the entity names and definitions in the enterprise conceptual model. And it may even be in the logical model, because you're dealing with attributes. Okay. So this may also be considered as part of reference data and metadata. So now, once we've got that, we then go into the management of these vocabularies. So yes, it's nice to have the vocabulary, but how do we ensure that it's controlled, the right level of quality is in those vocabularies? Where do we source it from? So things like the EU, ESG, we would want to source that into our set of ontologies that we're using within our business. How do we import them? How do we maintain it? And so the purpose of this controlled vocabulary is consistency in the description of content objects to facilitate retrieval. So lots of times when we have these domain ontologies like sustainability, there would also be a level of contextual vocabularies that link to it. Okay, so then with that ontology, we then have different views on the vocabulary. And then they have this level, which is a micro-controlled vocabulary. So then almost each facet of the ontology or the taxonomy could be a micro-controlled vocabulary, and then you can have different owners of that area just managing the terms within that micro-controlled vocabulary. Okay, hopefully you've all seen this many times. And if you haven't, there's actually Veronica's teaching next week, and you'll be able to see this graph. We call it the semantic chain, and it is about deriving more meaning. I know John O'Gorman gave us a presentation on Q6 facets, and also just to say with you, John O'Gorman's just about to release his product. He is interested in having some beta testers. So anybody and is keen to work with Dama South Africa, anybody interested in making use of his Q6 facet definition, he would be happy to help us work and help give us access to that technology and do some project work like that. His claim is that it doesn't take a lot of money and a lot of time. So we'd like to see that, because I think lots of us are battling on getting our glossaries right, getting our enterprise data models right. Everyone talks about the amount of time that it takes. So then in terms of explaining this chart, well, of course, what we're trying to go is, as we progress along this path, we are increasing the semantics, our understanding, okay? And so semantics is about the study of meaning. So it's not exactly speaking, but you'll notice every now and again, it's all about how do we speak data, and then how do we ensure that what we mean is well understood. And this is where the controlled vocabularies come in. All right, so the semantic chain or semantics comes from the original Greek word called semenikos. which is equal to significant meaning, important meaning within our business. So yes, we're using the word, but is it understood within the business, and do we have that significant meaning in our business? So almost each area or each domain, a word could have a different meaning in that domain. Okay, so we have the technology that we use to describe these controlled vocabularies, and then we have the different levels of controlled vocabularies that I was talking about just now, from glossary to thesaurus, enterprise data model, taxonomy, and then ontology. And from the ontology, we get the OWL language that we use, and that OWL can be imported into our knowledge graphs the top quadrant makes use of. And then we've finally got to this point where our data and our metadata are living as one together in the knowledge graph. And that's how we improve the machine learning and how we get the best out of it. Okay, Andrew, that would be great to volunteer. I'll certainly put that down. Thank you for joining. Anybody else who'd like to join, that would be great. Okay, so this is what an ontology refers to. What I like to describe here are, again, it's these words. Ontology is a study of what exists, a study of being, what exists right now. And so it's helpful to have that definition. And it is about another scenario of we may find data that doesn't fit into our ontology, and then we have a challenge. Our challenge is, is it something we don't know, or is it something that's being portrayed incorrectly? Is it a lie? Is it false? Is it fraudulent? We then have to do that judgment to understand what it is that we're looking at. Okay, so here's a nice view that we have of the semantic definition of ontology. It formalizes our content. And it defines the structure, very similar to our enterprise data model, but it goes a lot further. And you can sort of see the sort of level that it gets to is the high level root of an ontology is a thing. And then you could have a meta thing and a physical thing. And we can use these different paths to navigate through our content. Not only that, is you could have many different ontologies with different domains, and then it is about linking these different domains, almost a context of how, let's have a structure of the people within our business, and the domain of sustainability is one of them. And we can have multiple domains. There's not just one domain, but it allows you to grow that domain as you're progressing and add more meaning to it, and then join all the dots together. Okay. And yes, it has design methods. Its intended use is providing context. We would then govern that context and allow reasoning to come about with that domain. Okay. So just as a review, this is...
Sorry, Howard.
Yes.
I wanted to ask about the graph, that one.
This one?
Yeah, that one, yes.
Okay.
So if you have an ontology, would you need to go down the chain, or do you just keep going up?
Okay, so that is a good question, Debs, in terms of saying, well, if I've got an ontology, do I need a glossary? So if I've got an ontology in SharePoint and in my web and all my browsers, do I still need to go and generate a glossary? That's the question that you're asking, right? Or would I also need to generate an enterprise data model?
Either of them.
Okay.
Both of them sound valid.
Yeah, okay. So that is a good question, and a lot of the times it depends on where you are at a business. So if for example, you had a data-centric architecture, and that was all based on ontologies, then you may not need to generate your enterprise data model. But if you're still working, for example, with relational databases, it could be very helpful generating your enterprise data model, and from there, because those tools are now worth it, and they've got all the skills, they can generate the physical data model. Okay, so they can generate the model that SQL would use. So you may almost bring it down, and especially for business people that would want to read a glossary or a thesaurus, it depends on the tools and what they interact with. So I suppose to an extent one would hope that after a while we wouldn't need to keep on going down to this level, and that ontology will be so accessible that anyone could quickly open up the ontology and start to understand the meaning of the words and the relationship. Because the ontology gives you a lot more semantic than what these lower level elements would mean. But I think there's still going to be some usage for the lower elements on the chain until we overcome that and go to a completely data-centric environment. But I think we're all a long way from there. So for now, it's about, yes, you could get a taxonomy from the fiber as an example, and then generate the enterprise data model, FibDM, whereas the other way, we may have the UDM enterprise data model, and they are now currently building ontologies for that. So it depends on where you're at and what sort of architecture you're running with. If you're all in knowledge graphs and you don't have normalized, but even then, even with a knowledge graph, you'd probably go into some form of analytics and bring it into some tabular structure to do some counting. So, and then what does that tabular structure look like? So the answer is probably you would have to go back down again. So it's not just getting to the top. Okay, I think I'm maybe taking a bit longer and not allowing Esti to get going. So here is just a very simple example of being able to read a document, to look at the topics and the aspects of the document once you've got them defined, so you can now ingest these documents and make sense out of that. Okay, so that's the topic, that's the person, that's the organization, and it's now helpful to have these meta tags connected to the information in the documents. Okay, and what you're looking for is meaningful knowledge, and not just you have a big blob of data and you drop the documents in. That doesn't help you. You want to be able to navigate within elements of the document. Okay, so again, to take you through a sample, this is an example here of a property graph, not a knowledge graph. It's a document that's been ingested about BMW and all their different models, and this gets ingested into a property graph. Okay, here's an example of a faceted taxonomy, and I don't want to spend too much time. I think I have reviewed that. But we would build a ontology, a blueprint like this, which would describe vehicles, cars, relationships, and models. And then here is where we join the property graph to the meta knowledge, where we start tagging those properties in a knowledge graph. And so we're combining ontologies and instance data to get the knowledge graph. And this was one of the presentations that we got from Top Quadrant. And then they went on to explain how you have polyhierarchies, so we could have nodes within the taxonomy that come up to different levels, car types or car models. And so it's very helpful to manage all your drop downs within your business and within your website. Okay, not sure if there are any questions. That was a bit of a lightning run through it. It's now, can I hand over to JG to explain the use case, the sustainability use case that we'd be using to talk through these next 4 weeks in. All yours, JG.
Great, thanks very much, Howard. So maybe just a disclaimer or an acknowledgement that the work that the detail that Howard has just gone through, when I look at that, my mind buzzes. I'm not exactly sure where to apply each part of that. And it was by experiencing or understanding one of the challenges of a client that I then went, oh, maybe I need to explore the use case of really looking at my client's problem through a much stronger semantic model. And I'm even nervous to use the word ontology, because I still feel like there's aspects of it that I think I understand and things that I don't. Probably where I am, and this is an acknowledgement of where we find ourselves, and maybe it's a vulnerability of, I think I really understand the power of a taxonomy. And I've seen it where this client that we're working with, that I'm about to explain in detail, but I just wanted to highlight to anybody out there who's listened to Howard's discussion and went, oh my word, how does that apply to me? As I feel like I'm in a similar place, or was, and now as we walk through this process, Howard then turned to us and said, JG, don't assume that the rest of the DAMA community knows exactly how to apply these things. So be vulnerable, be brave, and present a business case and take everybody with you. And so there's under those auspices that I offer you our learnings with this client, and I hope that you receive it as such. We are asking to learn probably as much as anybody else in this process, and so this is not a case of instruction, this is a case of collaborative intent. And so what is quite nice about this use case is we can all relate to it. So it is a use case in and around sustainability. How it came about was middle of last year, a client approached me and said, we currently offer a extensive advisory service to clients who are trying to figure out or get a overarching perspective of their sustainability from a 360 view of our sustainability. Turns out that that's quite a hard thing to do, because the data elements that make up a sustainability use case are not just those beautiful, tidy, neat elements that come straight out of SAP and you can pick them up daily, weekly, monthly, however you want. It turns out that a sustainability use case has data elements in it that are dirty, have multiple types, are gathered from all over the place, where people's jobs are, you just got to get that data and you've just got to give it to us. And so this was the environment in which I initially consulted to this client, and they were collecting this information in Excel, bringing it together, and they got incredible traction with clients going, oh my word, this is almost unifying my valued perspective, and can we do more of this? And as soon as they tried to do more of it, all of a sudden the Excel spreadsheets and so on didn't scale. And so we brought in a much stronger and more robust data solution, and it was really exciting. The people that we worked with are on this call today. This is it's a South African initiative using South African people. Some of them were based in the Ukraine, and last week they quickly based themselves somewhere else. So, a big high five to our dev colleagues in the Ukraine at this time. So here we find ourselves in a situation is the client has been illustrating to their clients, this advisory business has been illustrating the value of a collective unified view of their sustainability initiatives. And now this advisory is starting to see that there's multiple opportunities, and how does one scale this? And that is the problem that I bring for you today. And I thought that it might be quite useful for us just to, over this 4-week period, I'm going to be representing the data executive in this process. And the role for the data executive is, at any point in time, I have to tie this back to commercial relevance. And so over the next 4 weeks, I'm going to show you the different elements, I guess, as we build towards making sure that the solution we're offering remains commercially relevant. And so I will be touching those sound bites over the next 4 weeks. And this week, I'm going to start by just expressing some of the exciting changes that are happening in and around the sustainability workspace. And it's a very popular space, but there are some boutique and niche functions that you can offer in and amongst these massive players that can bring value to clients. And so I'm going to share that piece with you, and then I'm going to hand over to Esty, who's been partnering with me in this process of, great, how on earth do you make this happen? How do you actually start to bring in a level of governance around the semantic chain? So I'm going to talk about the use case in terms of its value. I'm hoping that I'm going to share sustainability in particular today, this week. Next week, I'm going to start showing you some of the business cases, and then the following 2 weeks, I'm going to show you how those business cases actually translated down to value. So the why behind sustainability can be expressed by, well, has been the construct of value behind sustainability has been contemplated by BlackRock, Harvard, I think you're familiar with, and Goldman Sachs. But BlackRock being you can think of them as the watchdog of the investor. So this is who investors are accountable to. And so BlackRock have done some really good work just to have a look at across the board at companies that manage their sustainability risks and opportunities well, tend to have the following three things: stronger cash flows, lower borrowing costs, and higher valuations. Now, any one of those three attributes will make an FD, move to the front of their seat. So it's a great promise, but is it true? The next thing is Harvard are saying high sustainability companies outperform low ones, both with respect to their valuation and their accounting performance. And then Goldman Sachs is saying a growing consensus that integrating material ESG factors correlates to the long-term financial returns. So those three statements we've kind of summarized for the client in this graph. It says business value as your y-axis versus a moment in time when you took a particular action relative to a sustainability intervention. Those are big words, but it's at some point you spent money or you invested time on a sustainability initiative that is different to where you were. And the real question is, does that result in a trajectory that is different to the one that you were on? As in, does your business value actually increase? And the real question is that fact or is that fiction? And so that fundamentally is a very important question, because if that answer is true, you will have a run on any kind of ESG initiative because it's just better for business. But it's not that simple, because as you can imagine, sustainability, you've heard it for a long time, sustainable initiatives are initiatives that they take time. And so if we can go to the next slide, what I've highlighted here are, so it's not difficult to conclude that it's a hope that sustainability is good for business. Well, because it's kind of, shucks, if we don't do a good job, we're going to stuff it up for everybody. So you're hoping that's true. Except when you're running a business and you're accountable to your shareholders to spend the money well, you must make sure that every rand or every dollar that you spend is actually finding its way into generating value. And so this is the dilemma that a typical C-suite are finding themselves in. And I've summarized some of the questions that we're actually encountering right now with some big South African entities as they grapple with this construct of, I know we have to do it, but how do we make it financially sustainable? How do we sequence it? How do we make that happen? And I'm hoping that you'll see through the questions I'm going to highlight here, I'm going to shine the data light on these and show you how we as data practitioners have a keen role to play to help parties navigate to their sustainability objectives. So these 5 questions or 6 questions have been raised by CEOs, excuse me, not necessarily CEOs, predominantly the CFOs. Then you sometimes find a sustainability executive and you find the CEO just looking at his team or her team and going, okay, what are we going to do? And so I think what I'm going to do is just cover the first 2 questions. And then when we come back next week, I'm going to cover the next 2 and the next 2. So just breaking it up into pieces. Just the first 2 questions. And I want you to look at this through your data lens going, oh, shucks, how would you answer that? How would you manage that? So sustainability spend seems to have an upfront cost and then it's redeemed over time. So the question is, how on earth do we keep track? How do we link that spend to that benefit? And then how do we measure holistic business value that changes over time? And that might not just be stuff on your balance sheet or your income statement. It may well be your participation socially or with respect to increased governance. So how's that for a problem to solve? And these guys are scratching their heads right now. Second one is it possible to see each investment or decision that I'm needing to make through a sustainability lens? What needs to be true for me to overlay a sustainability view on each of my decisions? And then how can that help me inform and prioritize to maximize the business value over time? And that links to the graph on the left. Is there's a premise that if you maximize your sustainability initiatives, you then maximize your business value over time. So now there's this competition of what is the best and most sustainable option. So I'm just going to stop there because those two questions are enough for us to really deliberate in terms of where the challenge is. And next week, we'll go through the others. Next slide, please. So it is now starting to crystallize for both the advisory firm and actually for ourselves who are offering a data consulting, not just consulting, a data build service to this advisory, is that we might actually need to do this together. There's IP in the sustainability that we as data professionals don't have. The IP guys don't have the data, and that's actually what's happening here. It's one of these stories that I hope to tell you being successful, but it's how do you make a data product where you are actually engaging to build a product rather than just consulting. And so this is the positioning of the product. It's software as a service. And here we need to couple the sustainability metrics to the economics. And next week, I'll tell you a lot more about why that's so important. Top right is we need to seamlessly pivot between multiple standards. And so the real challenge here is, oh my goodness, there's many standards. Which one do I choose and how do I pivot? So the moment we use the word pivot, I hope all you data guys are going, oh, cool, we can do that. So that's what we do in pivoting. The bottom left, I don't even want to discuss that with you guys because this is sweet spot data legendariness, where can you trust your trend? This is a massive problem that depending on how you curate and gather your data, that should inform whether you should or shouldn't trust your trend. Because if your data is being collected annually in different ways, you've got this bias and this intrinsic noise that is coming in, and that's something that we need to help the client with. And then the last one are these frameworks. So just the next slide. There are multiple frameworks, and they all do different things. But the challenge that our clients face is that they are sometimes South African subsidiaries of an international business. So the international business wants to use GRI, but the South African business against the JSE standards uses DSGs, the one on the left. SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. Oh shucks! Within the same business, you're required to have to get the data to feed two frameworks, and these frameworks, they don't know about each other. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, we know they have taxonomies, but the relevance of each other within each other's world is we know we need a taxonomy that sits on top of these that allows you to pivot and pivot with confidence and knowing that you don't double account and so on. So that's the challenge that we face, bringing these frameworks together. And just the last slide, please. Oh, last slide from my side.
So JG, just to ask you there is a question on Menti, and just to say, is there an industry standard predefined vocabulary or ontology or definitions that can be used as best practice? So are you saying there are multiple?
Yeah, so please just go back to the previous slide. So what's really important, top right care about nothing else, CDP. CDP's focus is environmental, absolutely environmental. TCFD, they are environmental and governance. SASB have a much stronger industry standard. GRI, they try and be the umbrella of the umbrella, so they're trying to pull it together. But even they have gone, no, we're just actually going to specialize in the top 60 metrics and we don't care about the detail. And then these things on the left, these SDGs are fascinating because they are they've got emotive components to them, and there's 17 of them. So each one of these has their own taxonomy, but none of them ever intend to coexist. And the real challenge that businesses have is that they have to support multiple standards. And one of the greatest selling points of the solution that we've been able to deliver so far is you just pivot. You pivot between the GRI, the blue circle, and the one on the left, the one that's got all the little colors. So they are taxonomies. Each one of these are very well defined, nicely done. And that's why when I started, I said, I think I get a much stronger sense of what a taxonomy is, but actually the context of how the taxonomy is applied to the client's business demands that we go the next level and we actually take ourselves from individual taxonomies to a ontology of relevance, of context, of this is how it works in this business. And the other challenge is that we've got BEE. That's another framework that needs to coexist in this environment that is not relevant for a company in Namibia, for example. So you've got this regional switch on, switch off complexity. So to answer the person's question is there are taxonomies and they're excellent and they're data glossaries and they really are good, but they don't know about each other. And so the only way through that we can see is to help our clients go towards an ontology which holds the perspective of the taxonomy, but it brings in the context and the relevance of a sustainable ontology for this client. And our hope and desire is that we can actually make that scale across multiple clients. Could be a pipe dream. We might only be able to get this right client at a time. That won't be a great business model, but we're that's where we are trying. So
just to confirm, JG, then this is you're wanting to bring it together as an ontology, and each one of these would be a facet within that higher level, and it has its own taxonomy structure, and you may need to join different levels of the tree to each other and have relationships. Is that
absolutely? Yeah, that's a great summary. And one of the challenges that we see is, let's take the JSE, for example, because these are all international standards, very valid and very well structured international standards. So on the left-hand side, you see the branding for SASB. So SASB, which was the middle one that we've just come off, they've got 77 standards across 70. So like they cover 77 industries. So they go really specific on industry, and they do a great job. Awesome. But then you take the JSE, and this is topical. Look at it. The dates are, this thing was submitted. The comments for this is submitted by, literally 3 or 4 days ago. And so the challenge when we come to the JSE takes SASB and they go, you know what, that's perfect up until a point, but now we want to double click. Now we want more detail, more detail, more detail. And what I mean by that, for example, board composition. The JSE are interested in terms of what is the actual Women's Month. This is awesome. What is our female composition at a board level? So the international standards, don't go down to that level. So you've got this parent-child relationship that's coming as you start to pivot, and you've got these grain issues that develop as a result of you trying to move across these taxonomies. And it's our hope that ontology will hold enough context for us to be able to move backwards and forwards across these taxonomies, because the taxonomies are there. They're excellent. They are maintained internationally. You can think of them as reference data. They have a source and they're excellent, and a lot of companies know about them. But the problem that we're trying to solve is how do you pivot and offer perspectives as you toggle and switch. So I'm gonna stop right there. And what I see from a timing perspective is we've got 5 minutes to go. I'm gonna, Esty, I think what would be the best way for you to do is highlight the high level problems for the audience. It would be great if you could just use Menti to highlight issues, and then I think Esty, next week when we come in, Howard will give us a little bit more theory. And then let's drop straight into detail on some of the tech stuff. So let's use these 5 minutes well, and then we're going to stop there. Esty, over to you.
Okay, cool. Thanks, JG. So I'm gonna almost just run right through almost. So Howard, the next slide, you'll see where we did start. So we did start with the data model. We have a conceptual data model, and one of my biggest initial questions was, why does this conceptual data model not answer these questions? Why would we need ontology as well? And that's almost what started getting me on this journey, is to say, okay, so we need more detail than what the conceptual data model is supplying at the moment. So the conceptual model needs detail. It has a lot of the business rules contained in it, but certain details of other relationships might be an easier way to display it almost in a taxonomy. So that I'm going to go to the next slide, please. So just comparing two different frameworks. So the SASB one that JG mentioned, as well as the JSE, which is the local one. So we have certain problems with these frameworks. Well, not problems with the frameworks per se, but how they're divided. So as a data person, for me, seeing an accounting metric that says number of data breaches, 2, percentage involving personal identifiable information, and 3, number of account holders affected. The unit of measure being multiple units of measure and only linking to one code. As a data person, this poses a huge problem for me. Like, how do we approach that? Do we make them 3 different items and still have the same code? Because now it's not just our data, it's data from an international body as well. So if our clients need to report on this, do all 3 answers need to be there under one code? And then in which case, how do we keep track of it? And the same is actually done in the JSE as well, where they also don't have them split into just one metric with 1 unit of measure at a time. Next slide, please, Howard.
I have a quick question. Sorry.
Yes, go for it.
So just help me see the 3 codes. Are you saying the 3 subdivided into industries, they would all have the same one code, FNCB 23A0 by industry? Or is that what you're saying? You'd have the 3 codes?
What I'm saying is the accounting metric. So it asks for number of data breaches. And then it asks for, that accounting metrics. And then it asks for the percentage. So all the sectors and the industries have their own code.
Right, they have their own. Okay, sorry about that. Okay.
No, all good. And then we have some grain issues. So, I mean, as a data professional or as a data manager, or anybody that has anything to do with data, grain is a very fundamental problem and a very fundamental core to any design that we work on. So, for example, SASB has, for workforce diversity engagement, they just want gender, racial, and ethical group presentation for executives and other. And now the JSE asks for race, gender, and age, as well as other indicators. Where do we classify them? Where do we group them? How do we handle this grain conflict that we are in essence not in control of? So the grain is one of the issues. However, the next slide shows one of the other issues, which is overlap. Which could be similar to the grain, but the grain would typically be on what items to report on. But for example, the SASB talks about whistleblower policies and procedures. And then JSE talks about it as well as the nature of the different issues. So policies and procedures in this SASB context, is it the same in the JSE context? If they talk about wage, salary, remuneration, in which way are they the same, similar, or are they just completely different? And this is okay for a human to go through. Like if there's 50 items and I need to read through 50 items and decide if this is the same, similar, or something different, it's one thing. But what do you do if there is hundreds or thousands of items to go through? And this is where the semantic part really comes in, is about wage, salary, remuneration. What is the intention of all the specific policies compared to a new framework that we might be bringing in? And how do we deal with these types of issues?
So could I also ask that so you're talking about this, Veronica loves this overloading. She says
Yes.
The question in the data quality thing about overloading.
Field overload.
Yes.
So we're talking here field overloading.
Yes.
And then also what I would think is a challenge now is you publish your numbers, but you've now got to explain how you got those numbers. So you now are going to have that sort of link and traceability.
Yes, exactly. So overloading, Veronica, you'll be very proud of us. There's Jira tickets that use the word overloading, and we need to make sure that we handle that. But it's a big problem because now we have to explain. And in an ideal situation, if you submit a report to a regulator, you do not want to have them question a lot of things, and you have to explain. You want the report and how you publish it or issue it or send it to them to already be compliant and have all the details. So this is a really significant, it's a significant problem. And we're hoping Ontologies can help us a bit with that, as well as then like open for public comment so that we can request from the regulator to say, okay, this makes it difficult from a data perspective. Can we please split them up? For example, what's been done in SASB is they have a taxonomy that they've published. I have some views on whether it's really a taxonomy, but it is a standard for XBRL. And XBRL is Extensible Business Reporting Language. So SASB has published that from their side. And this does break up a lot of these different items. It doesn't make it significantly easier. It's still a very technical thing, but that does help. So which means that SASB does have an awareness of if you're talking about data points, it becomes difficult. But SASB, for example, is the only one that has this XBRL standard published. The others do not. So then you submit do you submit a PDF? So a lot of those types of discussions and how to support it and how to trace back data and data points. And if you have to report on two standards, that you don't collect the data twice. That's just no fun to me. Okay, Howard, next one. And this is now where we get to like how can controlled vocabularies, for example, help. So if we get a clear understanding of what wage means, what salary means, remuneration means, and we might have it for the different standards, but we combine those to see what could an ontology or an overarching term for that be? What is an acceptable drop-down list for the field? Okay, the next one, super quickly. So this is talk about almost that connection between the different frameworks, which are ontologies by themselves. It's creating that's taxonomies by themselves. Creating that bridge between them, we're already creating an ontology. And the next slide that I just want to show is kind of what we have already. So we're starting with a glossary. We do have enterprise data models to a certain extent, and we have architectural models, which also consist from the enterprise data models. Taxonomies, we have some of them, and on ontologies we don't really have. And then I think the idea plan where we really need to go is to get this into a knowledge graph. So we have that ontology, we have that structure, but that we add the instance data as well to that, to then see a knowledge graph. And then apply perhaps some machine learning, some fuzzy logic, some natural language processing to help people to search through this. Like it's not going to remove the people from the process, but like in the next slide, how do we help the subject matter expert to unify and to harmonize these different frameworks with each other? How would they know this is the same, this is different? How can they interact with that data where it is sustainable and not frustrating to do so? So we're going to chat about that next week. And then we thought of asking some questions. So we would really love to know, have you used a taxonomy, an ontology? did you plan to use it beforehand or kind of stumble on it, which is pretty much what we almost did. Have you used some tools for ontologies? Is knowledge graphs after ontologies, or what have you done with your ontology if you've used it? These are some of our questions, and we'd love your feedback.
Okay, so you're asking people to put it onto.
Yes, please.
Now, someone mentioned an open-ended. This is an open-ended question in Menti. I'm not sure what someone said. This page should be changed to an open-ended. But anyway, let's not worry about that. So if you could just put your answers down in terms of, have you used the taxonomy? Have you worked with an ontology or something? And then have you got a tool, things like Protégé or Top Quadrant? And then once you've got the ontologies, have you then been able to connect that into a knowledge graph? Is that those are the specific?
Yeah,
okay. Fantastic.
That's what we'd like to chat about.
Right. And then also really just to comment on those different ones. I think what we haven't mentioned is, because this is very tied to people's balance sheets, of course, it then would be useful to connect that to the XBRL thing that comes out of most accounting systems. Will be able to submit their balance sheets to the JSE in an XBRL format. That's how the JSE pulls these balance sheets in. But great. Thank you very much, ST. I think the next one is a blank graph.
Yes,
then we go back to this one over here. So any questions or any comments, please, could you add them to Menti?
And you're also welcome to ask us here if you prefer to do it that way.
I'd also like to ask Graham. Graham Cartwright was talking about some work he's done on data privacy, and he's looking at maturity. And then as well, it would be interesting now to see how people report via SASB on things like Papaya and GDPR and data privacy. Graham, have you seen the SASB sustainability issue?
No, I haven't heard it, and it's actually quite nerdily exciting from a sort of data and compliance perspective. I don't know how else to put it. Because that example that was given about 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes back, with the state wanting some information about the breakdown of the people sitting on the board, and it asks for a standard question about race and then sex and then age. And it immediately made me sit up and think, but you've got to be so careful with who's asking what information, because you could quite innocently pass out information to one of those parties, thinking, well, this is what the other guy asked for, and then you're actually transgressing POPIA or Privacy Act. And what I've discovered here is that even asking the age of a person is a sensitive issue.
Yeah. It's SPI. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and also I'm just thinking of that previous client where I was at doing the maturity assessments. They barely managed me to do their own reporting.
Yeah.
From a business perspective. Now we're going to throw 5 or 6 different facets to that reporting. As good as they are, it's going to be extremely interesting as they chase around in circles trying to find it all in time. But it does come back to saying you actually should understand your landscape and your data architecture to start with anyhow. Get your foundations correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then how can you make it as easy for them as possible? So like with the XBRL, to not ask them for perhaps the financial data they already have and have supplied to someone, and figuring out where to get the other data. No, it's been fun and interesting. It takes time. Like it takes a lot of time for clients to get this type of data. thanks, Graham, for the comments on the privacy path, because the difference between somebody asking for age data and somebody else not asking for age data really actually puts an interesting flair on it for how we need to handle it from our side as well. So the ontology or the knowledge graph, we can probably use some extra privacy tags on as well. Thanks. This is making me think.
Sorry for that. Yeah.
No. It's great. I mean, this is what we want this for. We want to have these discussions because everybody on this meetup and in the community in general have different experiences, have different viewpoints, or we have worked in different areas. So those are things that is very valuable for us to get, because it wasn't something that I've deliberately seen and considered and thought we should look at this from a privacy perspective for that one. So no, helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I can maybe share just from a master data management perspective. One of our clients at a previous company, hospital group, we can actually mention it as Mediclinic. They actually used eClass for as a reference model for classification for their product MDM suite or solution, and it was just a lot of actual effort to deal with, and that's a taxonomy. eClass would be a taxonomy, an example of one. But just to actually deal with the data from that perspective, and the versioning of that was quite an interesting project. The fact that the standards bodies, they bring out versions of the taxonomies, and you often, as a user of those things, you often adapt them or add to it even, and so it becomes an interesting mix of standard externalized reference data as a representation of the taxonomy, and then your own addition or modification of that, and that's actually what you use in your systems. So that was interesting, and in something like this, the problems can be quite similar, right? And just a second thing I want to say is, if I look at the definitions we use here and the typical benefits that we want to get from an ontology, my mind jumps to things like Informatica Axon, for example, which I think tries, it doesn't call itself, an ontology interface or anything like that, but it's essentially what it does, because it has the ability to allow you to have facets. So a facet in these tools could be, one facet is a data set, or an organizational unit, or a process, or a regulation, or a policy. Those are all facets, and they are connected to each other. And the whole point is to actually have if you want to use that ontology, it's about being able to search for terms and see, in what way they sort of appear in the data, and as an ontology, as something that brings all these facets together. I think that's one of the more practical examples of how an ontology makes itself available to users. Now, I actually just want to test that. And how do you agree with that? Is that sort of is that a practical way in which something like an ontology is actually bringing value to a user? Was it not quite that?
No, it is. And if we actually look at the way John O'Gorman is putting that Q6 together, part of it is that people are able to search from a web browser for things that they need, and then be able to navigate through that section. So I just wanted to jump a little bit to John O'Gorman's presentation, where he built that faceted vocabulary, the core Then they add content in terms of documents and links and stuff like that to it. And then they add analytics that, you know, we talk about the semantic layer. So they then go up that path. So almost what he's doing is starting the people off from a search engine, from a web browser, and then allowing them to navigate through what documents are related to this. And if I go to another side, which is this one over here, these are the different things that he brings together. So he's able to express all. His first thing is to say that all these facets should be mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive, saying that it should be able to describe everything in the business. Now, what JG has pointed out is that one taxonomy deals with one aspect. Then we have another SASB or JSE dealing with different aspects, and we need to be able to connect all of these dots together so that when people coming in looking for, I'm operating as this role, how do I then join that to this digital thing or this coordination and elements like that? So this is the navigation path. Now, I think that Informatica has done it, built a faceted taxonomy for managing data assets and data governance, principles, policies, and you can find all these connected things. But I don't believe it enables a management of the controlled vocabulary within that business. That's where I'm not seeing that it does that. Is that sort of what you're saying that it does?
No, I think that's a good point. Look, I'm not an expert in the tool, so I can't say for sure. But that's not the typical place where you would go and define the controlled vocabularies for a specific.
So let me ask another question. Let's say all your assets are managed in Informatica with Axon, and people are starting there, but they actually would like to see it related to the SASB thing. Now, of course, a taxonomy on its own, which is just data management, is one thing, but I want to be able to navigate it from the business point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that in that scenario, it would work because you would define, you'd basically unpack something like SASB. I just want to think into what level of detail would you actually be able to do that. You would probably not deal with the actual data not probably, you won't. I think in Axon, you would have the structure of SASB. And of course, there's nothing stopping you to actually just add all the detail that you want. It's not going to be a schlep.
What it's not doing is it's because your data catalog and the way people search for content, as we described, is using business terms, not using data management terms, right? So what you want to be to say, well, okay, I've got this data privacy area. Now go and show me all the content related to that data privacy, all the data assets, and then show me the analytics on top of that. So it's that navigating through the business data assets using the contextual vocab of the business, not the vocab of data management, but the vocab of the business. I get that it's helpful for the stewards and they're moving around what their policies are, what their assets are and things like that. But when you want to expose it to the business and choosing the right asset, surely it must come from a business vocabulary and not a data management vocabulary.
Yes, that's true. So if we take the example of a policy and a regulation, for example, in that case, look, in Axon, it's not to say that you're actually mainly interested in your data assets per se. You could just as easily have a view that we want to make sure that all the policies that we know about and want to define, how they satisfy or link to various regulations. Let's say, for example, POPI and GDPR. And in that sense, you would use terms, and it's got a built-in glossary too, of course. That's a facet in itself. So from a searching point of view, you you would certainly be able to use business language and business searches, because that's where the glossary comes in. And you could then navigate to, all right, how is this particular glossary term linked to GDPR or something like that?
Yeah, can I maybe so from my experience working with like Axon and specifically reference data management, we would put their definitions in Axon, but the actual content would be in somewhere else, because we needed it to be in a data structure where different applications and different teams could refer to this reference data and as a table, for example, and connect their data to that table or their application to that table. Where Axon, to my knowledge of the things that I've worked with, isn't very easy to connect with. It speaks easy to something in their own ecosystem, like EDC, so Enterprise Data Catalog. You can easily integrate Axon and EDC, but nowhere in EDC as well. It shows structure. It does not show content, specifically for privacy reasons. So it will show that this table has ID number, username, first name, last name, etc. But it will never show content. It will show the type of data. So it'll show pretty much, I want to say it'll show the ontology almost, but not the knowledge graph of the actual data.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're quite right. It won't go into the actual data assets. What's there? It'll stop there.
And this is what John O'Gorman, he actually tried to do a demo where he had that ontology, and then he would allow people to navigate through the facets and the hierarchies, and then say, now this is related to this patient note, and this is what the doctor did here, and then it's related to this therapy or operating theatre. That was the type of connectors that he was building and allowing people to sort of work through that. So, but I think we may be going a bit too technical.
No, I don't know. That's helpful to actually realize that a full ontology, and especially if you then go into knowledge graphs, is about converging content and structure. Right?
That's the primary thing on that. Why that knowledge graph is so powerful is that you got the elements living together, right? So you've got the metadata, you've got the content, you've got these relationships all coming together so that you can start the navigation and the movement and inferring different things in that area. So I think that's really why John gets so interested in bringing all of these connections together, and just seeing the different elements that come out of the data. But yeah, I think these worlds have to come together. And I just think of what JG's business case is that we've got these ontologies, but then we should be able to look at every single line item on the balance sheet that relate to that node in the graph, and to come down at it that way so that the business and the CFOs can navigate different ways, searching for the content, and then, of course, drawing the analytics on top of that to now look at to answer the question was it beneficial? But lots of times it's this cross maneuvering and jumping between the different areas. JG, I mean, you did mention that as a challenge where you're having to double click to different levels and then jump across the taxonomies.
Yeah, I mean, I'm finding this is a really interesting discussion. It's just not sure how deep how deep we have to go.
So what I suppose the comment you made that was important to me was, I've got separated taxonomies. I need to bring it together, and then when I bring the data in, when we're saying we're bringing the data in, we're bringing in balance sheet data, and then we're having to connect the line item on the balance sheet to the different taxonomy structures, and then allowing analytics to happen on top of that, so that it can be rolled up or sliced and diced in any one of those different areas according to how the balance sheet is tagged when it enters. Now, you may have a GARP standard, for example, or an XBRL standard that shows you all the different line items on the balance sheet, and a lot of that taxonomy or ontology work is done when the documents are ingested. You can now build all these paths and do some inferences that you're looking for.
Yeah, and I want to almost add to that, Howard, and that's where the financial aspect of it. So with a lot of the sustainability and the ESG items, finance and economic does play a role, but it's not by any means the only measures that's taken into account. So even though we might be able to easily get the financial measures because they are in a standard, people have debated for years whether that item is a line item and what it refers to.
Sure.
Where with a lot of the non-financial metrics becomes now a lot more complex because it has not gone through these decades of debates almost.
Yeah.
It's fairly new, or from a formality perspective, it's fairly new. There might have been companies that do report certain items, but from a specific standard, not necessarily. So it's interesting. Oh, that's what I think. I think the financial part's a lot more evolved than the non-financial part.
Sure, and then you've also got, what you've got on notes on the balance sheet that now are somewhat unstructured, and you may need to be able to understand what that it's saying, what the notes are saying.
Yes.
JG, have you looked at some of those bio open facts and okay.
No, I mean, where we would start is FIBO, right? So, like, I mean, so it's almost like there's no shortage of examples of taxonomies and ontologies. And I guess for me, it's the process of, I mean, I've never been able to articulate the value of actually being able to do this. And so I think that it's an exciting session. I just get a sense that we should, just keep this debate going. We've got 4 opportunities to do that. I'm just aware that we, Howard, I'm not sure time-wise, do we run till 5:30 or until 5? Because
we run until 5, but then a lot of times it goes.
Okay, so if everybody's comfortable to drop off or stay on just for the discussion, so Howard, it's almost like there are these international bodies, and they really ascribe a lot of value to their financial reporting, and that's where we see all the value. But that's where we see a lot of the energy having gone in, and there's a high level of maturity when it comes to processing the financial elements. And in particular, there's like the XBRL standard is well defined in the JSE, and I'm sure every other stock exchange. It's a high level of maturity. But if we have a look at the data elements in a sustainability initiative, the rationale is that you can think of it as money is, you put your money where your mouth is. That shows your intent. But the actual outcome of how successfully you've spent your money from a sustainability perspective is rendered through counts and ratios and non-financial numbers, which come from sometimes collected through PLCs that are sitting on conveyor belts. Sometimes they're sitting on, the amount of water that you've used in a particular plant that's coming out of a SAP system on like an MM module in SAP. It hasn't been curated. It's never been used for this function. And so you all of a sudden, you go into this whole realm of collecting data elements that haven't been curated, don't have the bootstrapping, aren't coming through XBRL. So, you almost get into the situation where, fantastic, if you can give us some of the financial information through the XBRL standard, awesome. But so that you can now focus on getting the other data elements that are making up the sustainability ecosystem. And it's a realization that it's early days. So I think that we are not looking for a silver bullet, because I don't think it exists. What's interesting is PwC and Deloitte and some of the other consulting companies most of their paradigms are with respect to the audit and the validity of the audit and some of the governance. So they go strong on financial and governance. Not many people go social, and not many people go the environmental item has its own. So we're working with a client who's an incubator. They provide an incubation service for young people to work through the incubation service. And that's a massive S play. That client doesn't care about, well, they don't have a strong element of environmental. The governance they'll get to, but they want to start with socio. So they're saying, for this amount of money, how many people have we placed in how many roles for how many engagements on how many projects? They really want to chase that angle through there. And so the chances are high those data constructs don't exist. But what we would be looking to do is manage the process in a way, having learned from FIBO, from having learned from, I'll have a look at Connie's suggestion in terms of learning from the bio world. I mean, the pharma guys have had this together for 20 years. So it is a case of borrowing and leaning and lending from skills as they come through. So it's just nice. What I'm quite excited about is that I'm quite excited about this DAMA group, that we can bring something. We don't have to, it's not like we're proving something that we have and we're showing everybody. We are welcoming everybody into our process. And it's been very informative just for people to, for us to learn where other people are, because we're going to get better through this process, mainly because we just understand the financial drivers. And it's like, this problem, it's not going away. It's just whether the data folk are going to stand up and bat it, or whether we're going to say, oh no, that's too hard. So cool. So come back next week. We're going to talk about the data citizen, and that data citizen is the person who holds a lot of the intellectual property of the sustainability solution, but we're finding that our data model needs to serve them as well. So not only do we need a data model servicing the end client who wants to be able to report on their sustainability, we also need a data model that actually is operating predominantly at a master data and reference data level to help a person make sure that we're not turning our frameworks into a ball of wool when we try and add another framework. So that's what we're gonna do.
If I can just to make use of the terms, I mean, are you talking more of a controlled vocabulary that you can link and join, not so much of a data model, but of a vocabulary for the citizen?
Yeah, I think so. Already we've introduced 2 terms, and we think we only need 1, and so already we don't have a shared vocabulary. So we definitely want to control our vocabulary and let that then form or guide us in terms of what solutions there might be.
Okay.
The person's currently managing 6 or 7 perspectives in Excel, and like we're going, well, we just got to do better to help.
Right.
And so yes, I think that's where we are. I think we're halfway down that semantic chain, as we've got a good grip on the vocabulary, but we're not controlling it to say this is what we mean in this context. And so although our data professional on this project is doing a really good job making sure anytime we use a term, we go back to, in this case, the tool is Ellie. We capture what we mean by that term, just so that we are building up a controlled vocabulary from ourselves. But then that immediately drives good behavior on the client, because we start using a consistent terminology. So yeah,
Okay.
Good.
Thank you
Thanks
very
so
much.
much.
Thanks, ST. Thanks, JG.
Cool. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Connie, for the comments.
Yes, thank you
Thanks.
very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Alrighty.
Sorry, guys. You may not have seen the request, but I don't know if it's if it'll help. But would you mind dropping the 5 questions that you're trying to achieve in the chat, or if we can just so that it just helps bringing back to what you're presenting and the journey that you're taking us on.
So
back.
Paul, what I'll also do is I'll put it in the write-up for tomorrow on the post, and we'll have
Cool.
those questions on LinkedIn as well.
All right, cool.
Thanks for reminding us.
Thanks, Paul.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's for Sammy. How about multilingual and multinationals all have different semantics? Sammy, this is exactly what that ontology does in terms of bringing multi-language and that together as well. Cheers. Sammy, so you want to, that's your basic getting all the meaning and consistent across all these different areas, the regions and the languages. Okay, I think he's on mute or.
Sammy said yes.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Interesting rabbit holes.